Laura, I really appreciate you joining us here today, and excited to get into the conversation.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me.
Well, we definitely appreciate you taking the time and all of the effort to come over here to do this. I really enjoyed getting to know you and all the work that you are doing with engineering leaders, engineers, all the data that you look at. Um, I would love to know, based on what you're hearing these days, what does organizational readiness look like for engineering teams as they speed towards 2027?
Yeah, this is a question on every engineering leader's mind right now. In the past, when we brought a new technology into our organization, especially when it was something as technical as AI technology, there was a lot of emphasis on the technology itself. So if we had the right technology, we believed we would get the right results. And with AI, that has just proven not to be the case. When we think about AI readiness and organizational readiness for AI, in fact, the tooling choices are some of the least impactful choices and some of the least impactful factors toward overall organizational success. So tool choice, of course, we need a tool that's capable of fulfilling the use case, but other things like having a clear and communicated stance about what AI is for from your executive team is incredibly important to keep everyone aligned and working toward the same goals. Things like great structured data models, great developer experience, time for training, structured enablement, those kinds of factors are bringing organizations faster toward their goals than just the technology itself. And in fact, organizations that don't invest in things like great testing, culture, quality practices, clear and communicated AI stance, user-centric focus on problems, are seeing the opposite of progress with AI. It's actually kind of propelling them toward, long-lasting damage or giving them some outcomes that they're not very excited about. So it is really a big problem and something on the minds of every technology leader right now.
Oh, that's interesting. Do you find are companies doing well with kind of measuring the outcomes they're seeing? Are they able to qualify that they're not seeing what they want to see and take different steps?
It's really difficult to measure the impact of AI right now, especially tying it to like a P&L or a revenue. There's still so many hops, skips, and jumps that go from engineering innovation all the way to revenue, and we're just not quite there yet in terms of maturity. In terms of measuring outcomes, one thing that I'm seeing organizations get really tripped up in is that they don't actually have an outcome in mind when they bring AI into their organization. So they hear the hype, they feel the pressure, and I would make the same decision myself. They bring in AI and say, well, this is a technology that is promising all these productivity gains, it's promising all this really futuristic advancement of engineering. I got to have it. They're getting pressure from their boards, from their C-suite. They bring it in and say, here, developers, everyone has a license to Copilot or Codex or Cloud Code or whatever it is, go forth. And they just hope that the curiosity and grit of the engineers, because it is so exciting, that the engineers are going to figure out exactly what the best use cases are. And that has proven time and time again at the organizations I've studied just not to be the case, unfortunately, because the system around all of those coding tasks that are now being sped up is still a constraint. It's still broken, and we need a lot more focus on end-to-end value stream outcomes and not just speeding up individual coding tasks in order to see that organizational benefit. So if we want to see organizational change from AI, we have to think about it as an organizational problem, not just as a problem for engineers at their desks working on code.
I imagine that may be a little bit of a tough message to deliver when you're advising C-suite engineering leaders. Are there any kind of key characteristics that you might instruct your clients to adopt or mindsets to get into to get them there?
Yeah, as an executive advisor, I do share a lot of hard truths that some leaders aren't very excited to hear from me in the moment, but then they really appreciate the different perspective, especially because I'm coming with a really broad view of the industry and what's working and what's not. And we're all trying to get better. It's just these problems are usually very deep-seated. That's the reason that they haven't been solved already. And so applying AI to those problems is really useful. When it comes to like an AI readiness model or like a a short list of things to look for. There's a couple out there that I would recommend engineering leaders look at. The first one is the AI capabilities model from Dora. Dora is part now of Google Cloud. They're very famous for the 4 key metrics. They do a lot more research beyond those DevOps metrics that made them famous. They've done a lot of research looking at organizations that have great outcomes with AI and putting together the pieces that allowed those organizations to accelerate. And so what they've done is they found 7 capabilities for AI readiness and put them into an AI capabilities model. So that's one thing. You can go to dora.dev to reference that. They have a lot of good research on that. The other one is the forest model from ThoughtWorks. And this is very similar to the AI capabilities model, which is some validation. We're all kind of coming to the same conclusion. But that's another one that organizations can look at. In short, it's all about really good, clear communication about what AI is for, making sure that you have space for experimentation, individual fluency, and that we're focusing actually on solving end-to-end problems and not just, experimenting for the sake of technology.
Yeah. That distinction between end-to-end problem solving and the outcomes you mentioned earlier in experimentation is a critical one. When we were having a conversation the other day, you used a phrase that I love, which is that we are in the soup phase.
We are in the soup phase, yeah.
Tell me more about that. Tell our audience more about that.
Yeah, I feel like we're in the middle of a transformation. Like we're in that phase when the caterpillar has like gorged itself on like new technology or whatever it is. It's like gone and made a cocoon, and then like the caterpillar just like turns to soup, and then it turns into a butterfly eventually. And like we're very much like in that soup phase. With any transformation, I think, the promise of being a butterfly is very exciting. But there's a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of like internal change that needs to happen for these organizations in order to emerge as that beautiful butterfly at the end of all of this. And, we've taken a lot of inputs. There's a lot of experimentation with technology happening. There's so many things, but right now we just we're not quite butterflies yet. We're really looking inward. We're looking outward. We're inspecting our practices, security posture. There's all these questions, and it's so much, and there's so much change going on that I feel like we're just sort of like, we're all a soup and trying to figure out what does the organization of 2027 actually look like, because quite honestly, nobody really knows. We haven't found a perfect answer that's repeatable and scalable and applicable across the industry as a whole. A lot of organizations are just trying to figure it out, and they're just finding little slivers of what works. And it's a lot of soup otherwise.
Yeah. Are there any particular industries that you're seeing more success navigating this phase? Are there any lessons that folks in our audience could take from that?
So here's one thing that's really surprising to a lot of folks, which is that traditional enterprises in highly regulated industries are often a step ahead of their counterparts that are working in like big tech and maybe consumer commerce, those other kinds of more like unregulated or more innovation first kind of industries. The reason for this is that it's twofold. So first of all, those organizations that are coming from like highly regulated industries, thinking like pharma, manufacturing, insurance, those kinds of things, change management is an organizational skill. Like they need to have like big enterprise organizational change management in place. And when I think about AI, I actually don't think about it as a technical challenge. I think about it as a change management challenge. And so these organizations have that muscle already. And then they are just using it to do, structured enablement, who's getting training, who's getting access to the tools. They have all of those mechanisms in place already. And so they've been a little bit ahead of the game when it comes to rollouts because they just have the machinery that works. The other reason is that these organizations need to deeply understand exactly how things are working because they need to regulate it and control it and comply. And that need for compliance has caused them to look and inspect and experiment and really test the boundaries and understand what that technology is. And that experimentation, that deep understanding has allowed them to use it for find use cases and use it really effectively in their orgs. So I don't think that trend is going to stay forever, but what we saw initially in the data was that, adoption, for example, the number of developers at traditional enterprises using AI tools daily was more than their counterparts at big tech. Like San Francisco, we're in San Francisco right now, big tech companies here, big tech enterprises, they actually had lower usage numbers when it came to AI adoption because those traditional enterprises had this change management and this like deep understanding for compliance and regulatory purposes, they were ahead of the game. So I don't think that will continue forever, but certainly at the beginning, it was a really interesting pattern.
Yeah. It's fascinating to me that at a time when these tools are giving us almost unbounded innovation opportunity, it sounds like what is actually most helpful is clarity and guardrails and understanding where the boundaries kind of are to use these things effectively.
That's absolutely right. Absolutely right. There is unbounded ceiling of what could be built, but when we want to actually apply it to organizations, that's a really different. That's not just experimentation and doing rapid prototyping and building a bunch of disposable software. That could be a part of the strategy. But when we talk about moving things from, this like experimental phase into long-lasting organizational change, there has to be quite a lot of scaffolding around it in order to use it. It's that same transformation story of cloud transformation, agile transformation, AI transformation. It's the same kind of process of looking at your processes, looking at what you're building, how you're building it, trying to apply a technology to help things move faster, move to market faster, and then seeing what the outcomes are, and then trying something different if the outcome isn't what you want.
Yeah. A lot of good rigor is maybe the word I would use around that.
Yeah.
In a different direction, another phrase that you've talked about in your work is something around an organizational immune system. And I would love to talk about this topic, specifically thinking about the software that our engineering teams are starting to build differently, the playing field that's getting leveled within these organizations. I wonder if you could talk more about what an organizational immune system concept means to you.
Yeah. So just like our bodies have an immune system, organizations have an immune system that are used that organizational immune system is your testing, security practices, that quality culture that we have built into engineering. And so if you have a really strong immune system, you're able to detect bugs before they ship to production. Or if something comes out in production, like, oh, whoops, there's an escaped defect, that anomaly can be detected super quick and also remedied super quick. So organizations who have this immune system have built kind of like, I think anti-fragile would have been another word that we would have used maybe in a different context. Like they've built resilient systems that have been intentionally designed to tolerate failure and to recover from failure quickly. Just like our immune system is made to tolerate germs and then also try to recover from them, recover from illness quickly. And so organizations that have that built in can go a little bit faster with AI because their immune system is really strong. And, perhaps this means there's more bugs or there's more, defects being escaped or something, but their systems are there so that they can catch it before something bad happens. Organizations who haven't invested the time to do that are in big trouble right now because we've just opened the door to basically like running unverified code on your infrastructure, which like rewind 5 years ago, people would be like, don't do that. Don't do that. That sounds like a terrible idea. And my background is working in CI/CD. And so my whole job was building infrastructure to run unverified code on my infrastructure because I'm running CI jobs from people. And this was like a huge risk. And now every company has assumed the risk profile of running unverified code on their own infrastructure. And in a lot of cases, like not just on your own infrastructure, but like exposing it to your customers, which is a whole second order of problems. You just released a new report, and there was some data in there that I thought was really fascinating. About 96% of developers don't really trust the code that comes out of AI coding assistants, which is pretty consistent with data that's happened, data that's been collected for, the last years. But only about 46% or 45% were actually verifying it. And that makes me nervous, quite honestly. I'm not surprised, but it does make me nervous.
Yeah, certainly as a downstream consumer of all of this software, I think about my bank and, all of those touch points. How do you find conversations go with almost like a C-suite crowd around this? Are engineering leaders able to communicate the urgency and attention needed to develop this type of immune system? What are you hearing?
What's really fascinating about the moment that we're in as an industry, I worked on containers from like very early on, like pre-Kubernetes was there for the whole like container hype cycle, right? And there were a lot of companies that were willing to press snooze on technologies like Docker containers or Kubernetes or orchestration. There are no companies willing to press snooze on AI right now. That is just not an option. And for the first time ever, instead of engineering organizations having to go and beg and plead with CEOs and CFOs to get more money for investment, it's actually the other way around, where CEOs and CFOs are coming to engineering leaders and being like, why aren't you moving faster? Please, like, do you want more money? Let's increase the budget. Like, this is really, it's like really unprecedented. It's quite a moment. At the same time, the principles and the practices that make AI more successful in an organization are things that we've known about forever. We know that, like, you know, having clean data, having really good CI/CD, having short feedback loops, having really good service boundaries, all of these like principles of developer experience are the things that are helping agents move faster and developers with agents move even faster. And one of the pieces of kind of unconventional advice that I give to engineering leaders right now is like, you know, 3 years ago, it would have been hard to ask for more money to invest in CI and CD. But now, if you can talk about it as an investment for AI acceleration or to de-risk your AI investment, wallets will be open for you. And so I even sometimes rebrand developer experience as agent experience. It doesn't make me feel good that, you know, it's difficult to get money for humans, but it's okay to get them for robots. But that is the kind of the point in our industry where we are. And I think we can capitalize that on that as engineering leaders and kind of position these investments as AI accelerants, even though kind of behind the scenes, we're like, ooh, you know, we're getting investment finally for doing all these this investment in things that we knew were important the whole time.
There's best practices.
Best practices, yeah. The physics of good software delivery have absolutely not changed because AI is on the scene. What we can do is we can apply AI to CI/CD, to security, to all those things, and we can use AI as an enabling factor to improve the system. But at its heart, we still need fast feedback loops. We still need really strong testing and quality practices, security practices. Those things are even more important now that AI is on the scene. They don't become less important because AI is not going to cover up those problems. AI just amplifies those problems.
Yeah, yeah. You touched on a couple of things there. The first one I want to double click on is developer experience.
Mm-hmm.
How are you seeing the developer experience change as the role and responsibility of the human and developer shifts? And what is their reaction to that? How is it being received?
This is a really interesting question, one that I have a lot of data to back up. There's so many different aspects of developer experience, and so there's a couple that I'll touch on. The first one is cognitive load. And so cognitive load is like, you know, how much mental load, how many things do you have to be juggling in your head in order to get a task completed? And cognitive load is one of the 3 pillars of the DevEx framework. It's like the triangle of developer experience. We have cognitive load, feedback loops, and flow state. And overall, AI is improving developer experience. It's helping engineers work faster, enjoy their work more. It's, you know, bringing some joy back to development. I was on a retreat last week with Martin Fowler and quite a few other folks that ThoughtWorks put together. And one of the things that came up in one of our kind of unconference sessions was that one of the attendees there had done a survey, like a small study of developers in her organization, and actually found that their cognitive load had gone significantly up, which is, I absolutely believe, right? Yeah. And it's like, it's a little bit different than other data that I've seen earlier. And agents are really responsible for this shift. Like before agentic workflows, when it was autocomplete, cognitive load was going down because it's like, oh, I just don't have to remember as much. But now that we have developers being responsible for like entire value streams, and sometimes many of them at once with agents, cognitive load has actually gone up because it's only the tricky decisions that get escalated back to you as the human being. And you have to manage a lot more higher order problems and more of them at once. And so the cognitive load is increasing. And as soon as she said that, there were a bunch of people being like, oh yeah, that's been my experience as well. You know, when I'm kind of orchestrating my fleet of agents, my cognitive load is incredibly high because I'm just doing way too many things at once. Whereas like before I was single threaded and now it's like very multi-threaded. So that's one interesting thing. And I'm curious to like keep an eye on that of like the experience of the developer, because it is, this does signal that evolution of skills that developers are undergoing. We're having kind of an existential crisis when it comes to how developers are experiencing and perceiving their work. There's some people that were really proud to be really strong syntax writers, really strong coders, and they have really specialized skills. And now those specialized skills are becoming less valuable as each day goes by. And that's a really difficult thing. There's other developers who just really love solving the business problems, and they're builders and they love like just getting stuff and shipping it. And those people are having the time of their lives, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
But it's had quite an interesting impact on kind of the lived experience of a developer writing code, and like, what does that mean? What's their value? And that, organizations need to pay attention to that as well, because that influences things like attrition risk, management support, all of these other things. Like, it is quite a pivotal moment in our industry right now for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, I often think, the developers that I worked closely with over the years, not many of them went into the discipline in order to become almost a manager, right? And now they're becoming more this agent manager or orchestrator.
Yeah. One of the things that has come up, so like 2 years ago, my friend Steve Yegi gave a talk saying like AI is the death of the junior developer. And there's been a lot of kind of discourse around novice being optional now. So it's like, if, before companies could hire junior developers, and now why would you do that? Just pay for an agent and give it to your senior developer. And now every senior developer basically has an intern. And I don't necessarily agree or disagree with that pattern. I think I've seen it come true in certain organizations, and I've seen other organizations reject it. But like, that is the idea there. Now I had a research roundtable with a few researchers from Google, Microsoft, and GitHub. And interestingly enough, what we brought up in that research roundtable was actually that AI is helping junior developers advance in their career faster. They're actually becoming senior at a more rapid rate, because they have to think about the business problem and the value stream before they had a tech lead or a team lead kind of break down their tasks into these really bite-sized things, and they would work on really incremental, just like parts of the puzzle. And now with AI, they're having to basically manage they're an intern of their own. And so they're building these, communication skills, business skills, planning, project management, all of those kinds of skills that feed into being a senior engineer, and they're actually progressing a lot faster. And I thought that was just a fascinating paradox, that AI is both the death of the junior developer, but also the thing that helps them become more senior more quickly. And it's just so difficult when engineering leaders are trying to figure out, what does this mean for talent management, capacity planning? There's a lot of question marks there. And quite honestly, it looks a lot different at every organization, because every organization kind of has their own, project management tendencies and the different ways and the culture of how they work together. At the end of the day, it does come down to kind of culture and how teams are working together, more so than it comes down to the specific technology that these teams are choosing.
Yeah. Yeah, this is really resonating with me, that, again, that it's a systemic challenge, right? And opportunity, that there's so many different pieces to the puzzle. So another piece of the puzzle that you and I have spoken about is this concept of citizen developers within organizations. So again, with the playing field leveled, unprecedented access to tools that allow us to build things. Talk to me about what you're hearing out in the field around responsibilities. We've got to think about testing, security, maintenance, all the things that developers have done, since code existed. How is that working now in these organizations?
Previous conversations I would have with organizational leaders, I would talk about AI being really used in one of two ways. Like, your engineers are using AI-assisted, AI coding assistants to build software, or you're building an AI feature for your end users. And those things are really, really different and have different, different success criteria. You use them in different ways. And it was sort of like, it's either this one or this one. And pretty much everything fell in that bucket when I was advising executives. Now there's a whole third pillar that's emerged, which is the citizen developer, which is what happens when it is trivially easy for, an HR business partner or a junior marketing person or someone on your sales team to build bespoke software that solves their particular use case without engineering being in the loop whatsoever. This is brand new for a lot of organizations because up until now, everything has gone through engineering, or they're using a low code, no code platform like Zapier, where all of the security and maintenance is obfuscated away from that team. And that's just not the case anymore. And what do organizations do when they have N number of people who can just go to ChatGPT and upload a CSV of data and say, hey, can you do data analysis on this? That's very dangerous. It's very exciting. There's a lot of experimentation, but it's also very dangerous. And so what happens? So there's a huge gamut of, that example of uploading a CSV to ChatGPT and asking it to do some data analysis. Well, does that have PII in it? A lot of these functions that are becoming citizen developers are functions that have access to a lot of sensitive data, like HR, marketing teams with, emails and lots of PII that needs to be scrubbed. And so that clear and communicated stance, acceptable use policies, they're not just for engineering teams, it's for the whole entire company. So if you're listening to this and you don't have one, please do that. Please do that immediately. It should be the top priority for your executive team. So that's one. The other piece is like, I'm looking at data from, Cursor, Cloud Code, Copilot, and I'm looking at the job titles of the people who are using it. And it is not just engineers, and it's not even just engineering adjacent people anymore, like product managers or other managers, designers. There's a lot of other folks who have access to AI coding tools. And what happens when they're building what they perceive as like disposable software? They don't have an engineering background or know anything about what good solid testing practices or how code gets deployed even, or how code gets maintained. And they build something bespoke and they want it to live somewhere. What's the deployment target for it? Who's responsible for maintaining it? How do we manage this? How do we do that? Is it engineering? Is it something else? Is it a swarm of agents who's responsible for maintenance? Like there's just so many unknowns. The benefit to the business is really clear because we've removed the constraint of engineering, and we've also removed the constraint of buying third-party software for a lot of these use cases. I think what we're going to see is this influx of bespoke, super targeted, like personalized software that I build for myself or you build for yourself, and in an organization that fixes real problems. But the question is like, where does it live and who's responsible for it? That is a question that organizations are struggling with right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I imagine if there's one thing maybe a developer would not want to be even more so than a manager, it would be, now I have to maintain software that someone else in my organization wrote who wasn't approaching this with a sort of systems engineering mindset.
Yeah, I mean, is that the job of SRE and platform engineers right now? Possibly, yes. But I've definitely been on call for code that I didn't write, and I'm like, what is going on? But it's really difficult. And when we're using AI tools and you have that immune system that's been developed, like not only do you have better mechanisms to stop it, but also, the references that your models are looking at are better and are better structured, and they're going to output something that looks more like that really solid code that your organization has. It's going to borrow patterns and use things. So investing in solid security testing, quality, those kinds of things, it's so important because it fans out into the rest of the organization. And an investment in, over here is actually something that's going to benefit, those citizen developers. And who knows what's the next, I have those 3 pillars of AI use, and I don't know what the 4th one will be. I have some ideas, but who knows where this is all going to go. And so making those solid foundational choices right now can only help accelerate the future.
Yeah. And so again, are you finding that getting the investment, both time and other kinds of resources into that, is the C-suite listening to that right now, or is there kind of more of a business case that needs to be made to quantify that?
Yeah, there definitely needs to be a business case used to quantify that, because it can still come across as like, oh, technical debt, or like, hey, why didn't you have that before? And I think one thing that engineering leaders have just historically been poor at is building out a business case and articulating business value for things that aren't customer facing per se, that have those sort of, you know, amplification properties of like accelerating everything. So organizations, I think, are happy to spend money on things that they can really see the ROI on. And in order to see the ROI, we need to have data and metrics in order to build that story backward from somewhere. So, whether you like it or not, you're a business leader. That's the advice, the kind of painful advice that some engineering leaders don't want to listen to, but they listen to me, and then they understand that that might have been uncomfortable to hear, but they have to come to terms with that identity shift. When you're a business leader, the language of business is money. It's as simple as that, like whether we like it or not. And so if we're trying to make an investment in CI/CD or in security or whatever it is, we have to work backward from dollars and cents. We have to get there somehow. So we can talk about risk avoidance and cost avoidance. So, if you have data on how many customer facing outages you have, and prediction of like how this will de-risk it, it's really hard to prove the absence of something. And I think that's where we get into trouble with like preventative care. But we've modeled this successfully for healthcare. We know the value of preventative care, and it's not impossible to do it. It is a little bit like back of the napkin mathy, but that's still better than just standing, putting your foot down and saying, oh, just trust me on this one. Like, we need to do better than that. So having data about customer-facing outages. The framework that I co-authored, the Core 4 framework, does a really good job of putting all of this together, and it's just 4 key metrics. We've got speed, developer experience, quality, and then innovation ratio, looking at like KTLO and maintenance versus innovation time. If you can have some of those numbers to bring to your argument for an investment on, CI/CD tooling, automated scanning, whatever it might be, this makes the executive team more receptive to it, because it's easier to draw that line from this is what I want to do to dollars and cents, and translate everything back into the language of the business. In terms of the readiness, like I said, I think lots of organizations are really ready to open their wallets for AI investment. And so any opportunity that you have as an engineering leader to frame a DevEx investment or a CI/CD investment as an AI investment, I would say take that opportunity, because it's very easy to get money for that right now.
Yeah. What do you think is really driving that? What's sort of behind that for the C-suite? Is it like a FOMO thing? What is it?
It is. We're in such a peculiar macroeconomic environment right now, right? So we had COVID happened, and then we had this explosion of hiring. And a lot of companies were like doing speculative hiring, right? They were like, we're going to hire so that we have capacity for whatever it is we're going to build next. When ZIRP ended and money became not free anymore, a lot of organizations went, oh, that perhaps was unsustainable. Oopsie. My bad. And then we went back, the pendulum swings back and forth. We went into a round of layoffs. So like ZIRP is ending, money is not free anymore. And then at the same time, we have AI taking off. And it was just sort of this perfect storm of organizations feeling extreme economic pressure from shareholders, from the board, from VC investors to operate really, really efficiently. And now with AI making these like big hyped up promises, it's like catnip for everyone, for business leaders, especially ones who don't understand how software is made. It's like, oh, this study is promising a 10x, a 10x improvement in efficiency, or this one says it saves 30% of developer time, or this company is writing 90% of their code with AI. Why aren't we doing that? And what is really difficult for leaders who don't understand software engineering, and then perhaps haven't taken the time to think about the data literacy skills that they would use in any other situation and apply them to those headlines. Like they're just not thinking like, okay, what's the message behind this? Like who's paying for this? Who does it advantage when I think this? Are they selling an AI tool? Like all of those things, we kind of just we get swept up in it and don't think about it. And so engineering leaders, again, one of those hard truths that people hate to hear, but like whether we like it or not, your job is to educate the other leaders in your company about how AI works, how it works, how software gets made. I mean, there has to be some level of them, coming with a baseline of understanding. But I work with a lot of CTOs and VPs who are just really frustrated of having to be the person in the room who's explaining this over and over and over. And they think it's like unfair. And I tell them that like, I know that it feels unfair, but it is your job. And that is the role of a CTO, is to like technical translation for the rest of your team. And right now, what that means, unfortunately, is helping people understand like what are the constraints in software delivery. It's not coding task level stuff. It is not stuff that happens on the laptop of a developer. It's something that happens like out here in the outer loop, as we would call it. And so we need to like really translate that and be very clear about what's going to work, what doesn't work. The other piece of advice that I have for engineering leaders is that, all of this data and all of the hype that's out there, the best antidote to it is data, but your own organizational data, not industry benchmarks, not someone else's organizational data, but start getting data from your organization about your problems and then see how AI is solving your problems, because that's the only thing that matters. Like, I don't care what startup A or startup B has done, because they're operating in a different context. And so we can pattern borrow, we can take in great practices and like experiment and try things. But at the end of the day, what your CFO needs to see is, okay, we, got Cloud Code or Copilot licenses, and we've enabled, 5 teams. And here, you know what? They are shipping 25% more pull requests a week, but actually our code review is still a bottleneck. We're actually not shipping more to our customers, and the quality of code reviews is going down, and we've had like 10% more customer-facing incidents. Like, these are the stories that you need to tell or be able to tell about AI, and it is nearly impossible to tell that without the right data from your organization.
Yeah. That's a really important point, and I'm trusting that we will be sharing all these resources as well, the different frameworks you've referenced. With our audience. I'm curious, is there anything that you would say today that gives you hope that we are going to move through the soup phase and all of us become butterflies?
Yeah, I do see a lot of promise and like a lot of butterflies out there in the future. I think some organizations that, they have it in their DNA to invest in doing things the right way, and they've built the machinery, and they're only going to keep accelerating. Those companies are doing some super cool acceleration projects. They're targeting AI super laser focused to, for example, Booking.com is a company that I've worked with for quite a few years, and they have pointed AI at specifically legacy migration projects. So not like, sure, there's a lot of experimentation going on there. They're saying specifically, let's see how we can use it. And they do these accelerators where they'll bring in a real team that's really working on migrations. And sometimes they bring in a vendor to do training or like individual leaders, fluency kind of training. And they work in this very compressed environment with a real use case, and they prototype and experiment. And at the end of these 5 days, they have something that actually really helps them like fix their problem. And also they've learned more individual fluency skills. They've learned about it as a team. They've done a lot of learning. They can take that thing that's, it's not finished, but it's like 60% of the way there. And then they can go keep iterating on it. It's targeted at a very specific outcome. They have measurements on the outcome. And those are really strong patterns for how AI is transforming. I also work with a lot of startups who are iterating at a mind-blowing pace, because now they can do stuff while they sleep, quite honestly. I think we're still really far away from like that $1 billion unicorn one-person company. I don't think that that's even in like the next 5 years. But I have seen a lot of builders build something that can easily bring in 50K MRR with Claude code and some hopes and dreams, you know? It's not cheap to do it that way. I think that's also the other thing is like, this all does come at a cost. Companies have to pay for this innovation. And quite honestly, some organizations are looking at their balance sheets and being like, I don't see, for the gains that we're able to realize, like, this is it really is expensive.
Yeah.
And you know, organizations are going to have to balance that. But I do see a lot of butterflies out there, or at least, you know, some very early adopter organizations like getting to the butterfly phase where they've really reimagined their processes. They've given their engineers really great tools. They've enabled them with training, with really clear outcomes, and then their engineers are just executing towards something and doing it really well. For as many butterflies that I see, though, I see the exact opposite, which I'm not sure what that would be, but we can all...
Moths?
Yeah, maybe a moth, or like a dead bug on the bottom of a stick, where, you know, they've just like been pumping money into a totally broken machine it's not just a neutral impact. It's like actually causing long-lasting damage because the maintainability of their code bases is dwindling. Their engineers are getting frustrated, burnt out, leaving. They're introducing security vulnerabilities, introducing so many maintenance issues that they don't even have the scope to really understand what it all entails. And they're doing it really fast because now we can do things so much faster than we were doing them before. And that's my concern is like what AI has done is it's kind of like dropped a bomb in the middle of our universe and expanded things in all different ways. And so we have, you know, the up and to the right group that's doing a lot of great things and accelerating. But for as many of them as we also have these organizations that are lagging even further behind. And the trick is, and I think the kind of the crux of the moment is like a lot of organizations don't know if they're up here or if they're down there because they don't have any insight into how they're actually performing, or they actually have never sat down with their whole executive team and said out loud, this is what engineering performance looks like. These are our standards, and this is how we're measuring it. And without that, it's really hard to know if AI is having an impact because like compared to what? And we can't skip that step.
Yeah. That's good advice. I mean, starting with your own data, you know, bringing in the guardrails, bringing in the enablement and the structure, really taking a hard look at your organization, at maybe some steps that have been skipped along the way. It's okay. We don't have to shame spiral on it.
Yeah.
Let's start with a good baseline now and get there as quickly as we can.
Yeah. AI is not going to cover up organizational problems that exist. You can use AI with eyes wide open to apply it to organizational problems that you know exist. And that is a really, really impactful, powerful, responsible way to use AI that's going to have really great business value. The organizations that just kind of have a hope and a prayer and give all of their developers licenses and hope for the best, those organizations are finding themselves in trouble.
Well, Laura, thank you so much for your time here today. Appreciate everybody's time and attention for our conversation. I hope that it's provoked some thoughts and hopefully some next steps and actions and some best practices.